Just stay quiet around my friends, she whispered, then walked past me to sit beside her ex-boyfriend and pointed to the far end of the table. I didn't argue. I grabbed my coat and left without saying a word. 20 minutes later, my phone was flooded with messages, each one more frantic than the last, begging me to return and insisting she didn't mean it that way. I'm 29 years old, and I watched as Sophie leaned in close and whispered those words that changed everything. Just stay quiet around my friends. She straightened up, flashed a bright smile at the group, then completely bypassed the empty seat next to her to settle in beside Derek, her ex. Then she turned to me, still standing there awkwardly, and gestured toward a chair at the opposite end of the long table. Alex, you can sit over there, she said casually. 9 people were watching. I stared at the seat she'd obviously saved for Derek. Then I looked at the isolated chair she'd assigned to me, separated by 5 strangers and 1 acquaintance. I didn't make a scene. I didn't demand an explanation. I simply picked up my jacket and walked straight out of the bistro. I got in my car, drove away, and silenced my phone. When I finally checked it 25 minutes later, there were 52 text messages waiting. Sophie and I met 3 years ago at a bookstore cafe in downtown Seattle. I was there on a rainy Saturday afternoon, reading near the window, when she sat down at the table next to mine with a steaming latte and her own book. She noticed what I was reading, a collection of short stories by a relatively obscure author, and struck up a conversation about it. Within minutes, we were talking like we'd known each other for years, discussing literature, sharing recommendations, laughing at the same observations about people watching in coffee shops. She was charismatic, witty, and had this magnetic energy that drew people to her effortlessly. I admired that quality from the start. I loved how she could walk into any room and immediately become the center of attention, how strangers would gravitate toward her warmth and confidence. She had a way of making everyone feel like they were the most interesting person she'd ever met. I was more introverted, quieter by nature, someone who preferred small gatherings to large parties, deep conversations over superficial small talk. But she told me that's exactly what attracted her to me. She said I grounded her, that I was her calm in the chaos, her anchor when the world got too loud. She said she'd been waiting for someone who didn't need the spotlight, someone who could just be present with her. I believed every word. The first year was genuinely wonderful. We spent weekends exploring the city together, trying new restaurants in neighborhoods we'd never visited, taking ferry rides to the islands, hiking trails in the Cascades. She introduced me to her world, art gallery openings where we'd pretend to understand abstract paintings, live music shows at intimate venues, poetry readings at small bookstores. I showed her mine, quiet mornings at farmers markets, Sunday afternoons spent reading in separate rooms, but together, the simple pleasure of cooking dinner side by side. We moved in together after 9 months, which everyone said was fast, but it felt right at the time. Her apartment in Capitol Hill was larger and more centrally located, with high ceilings and hardwood floors and big windows that let in beautiful light. I gave up my lease on my smaller place and relocated my belongings. It made practical sense. She worked remotely most days as a marketing consultant while I commuted to Bellevue daily for my job in software development. She never asked me to split the rent equally. Since her name was on the lease and she'd been living there for 3 years already, she insisted on covering it herself. I handled groceries, utilities, internet, and we alternated paying for dinners out and weekend activities. At the time, it seemed like a reasonable division of expenses, a partnership that worked for both of us. Looking back now, I wonder if that financial imbalance was the first subtle sign of how our relationship would eventually tilt. How I'd slowly become a guest in what was supposed to be our shared home. The warning signs started around 7 months after I moved in. We had plans to meet her friends for Sunday brunch. I got dressed and waited by the door, only to have Sophie emerge from the bedroom in sweatpants. "I'm completely exhausted," she announced. "You should go without me." I protested, explaining that I barely knew these people and it would be awkward showing up alone. She brushed off my concerns. "They're going to love you. Just go." So I went. I spent 45 uncomfortable minutes at a table with 6 people who barely acknowledged my presence, scrolled through their phones, and left after ordering. When I returned home, Sophie was absorbed in her laptop, laughing at something. She didn't ask how brunch went. She didn't apologize. This pattern repeated itself with disturbing frequency. She'd make plans with her friends, then cancel, but still expect me to attend alone. Or she'd invite people over without warning me, and I'd come home to find our living room packed with strangers. Once, I returned from a 3-day business trip to find Derek lounging on our couch, drinking one of my beers, watching basketball on our TV. Sophie introduced him casually. "Oh hey, Alex, this is Derek. We dated back in college." I extended my hand. He didn't stand up, just reached up for a lazy handshake, his eyes never leaving the screen. Sophie sat down beside him and asked me to grab them both fresh beers from the kitchen. Not, "Would you mind?" Just an expectation that I'd serve them. I began noticing how differently Sophie spoke to me when others were around. Her tone shifted entirely. She'd cut me off mid-sentence or laugh at my comments in a way that made me sound foolish. Her friend Jessica once asked about my work in software development. I'd barely started answering when Sophie interrupted. "Oh God, Alex's job is incredibly dull. It's all coding and algorithms. Let's talk about something actually fun." Everyone laughed. I forced a smile and stayed quiet for the rest of the evening. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, that she was just comfortable around her friends. But the knot in my stomach told me otherwise. I started dreading group dinners, finding excuses to work late when she hosted parties. She noticed, but never asked why. She just stopped inviting me. Derek's presence in our lives increased dramatically about 4 months ago. At first, it was just text messages that seemed innocent enough. Sophie's phone would light up constantly during movies, during dinner, during conversations we were having. She'd pick it up immediately, her face illuminating with that particular smile, the one I used to think was reserved for me, and type back quickly. His name was at the top every single time I happened to glance over. I asked her once, trying to keep my tone casual and non-accusatory, why they were messaging so frequently. I didn't want to be controlling or jealous. She barely looked up from her phone. "We're friends, Alex. We've been friends since college. It's completely normal for friends to text. Don't be weird about it." That phrase, "don't be weird about it," became her standard response whenever I expressed any discomfort about their relationship. It was dismissive and final, shutting down any conversation before it could begin. I didn't want to be that guy, the insecure boyfriend who couldn't handle his girlfriend having male friends. So I swallowed my concerns and said nothing more. But then Derek started physically showing up everywhere we went. He'd somehow be at the same bar when we met her friends for drinks in Fremont. He'd show up at the same park when we went to group picnics on Capitol Hill. He'd be sitting in her apartment when I came home from work, lounging on our couch like he belonged there. And every single time, Sophie acted like his presence was the most natural thing in the world. Like of course he'd be there. Why wouldn't he be? What's the problem? What bothered me more than his constant presence was how Sophie's entire demeanor changed when he was around. She'd position herself physically closer to him than she ever sat to me anymore. She'd laugh harder and longer at his jokes, even the ones that weren't particularly funny. With this bright, unrestrained laughter, I realized I hadn't heard directed at anything I'd said in months. She'd constantly reference shared memories, spring break trips to Mexico, college parties at their fraternity house, inside jokes from their relationship that I couldn't possibly understand and wasn't invited to understand. They'd reminisce about restaurants they'd been to together, concerts they'd attended, professors they'd had, friends from their past. And I'd sit there feeling like a spectator to their relationship rather than a participant in my own, watching them exist in this shared world that had no room for me. Her friend Lauren pulled me aside after a group dinner one evening. We were outside waiting for our rides, and she looked uncomfortable. "Alex," she began hesitantly. "I don't know if Sophie's mentioned this, but she and Derek were extremely serious in college. They almost got engaged." I felt my stomach drop. Sophie had mentioned they'd dated. She'd never mentioned how serious it had been. Lauren bit her lip. "Several of us think it's weird how much time they're spending together lately. We've tried talking to Sophie about it, but she gets super defensive." I thanked Lauren and got into my ride in silence. When I walked through our apartment door, Sophie was already asleep. I stood in the doorway watching her for a long time. I considered waking her to ask directly, "Are you still in love with him?" But I didn't. I was terrified of her answer. 3 weeks later, Sophie mentioned a dinner. "Some of my college friends are visiting. We're having dinner at that French place downtown. You should join us." "Sure," I replied. I asked who would be there. She listed names. Derek was among them. I showed no reaction. The evening of the dinner, Sophie spent nearly 3 hours preparing. She tried on 4 different outfits, redid her makeup repeatedly, constantly checked her phone. I asked if she was excited. Absolutely, she said. I haven't seen some of these people in years. We arrived at the restaurant at 7:30. When we entered, I saw an extended table in the back. 6 people were already seated, laughing, sipping wine. Derek was among them. He stood when he spotted Sophie, embraced her in a hug that lasted several seconds too long. God, it's incredible to see you. Sophie's entire face illuminated. She returned the embrace, and for that moment, I ceased to exist. I stood there clutching my jacket, waiting for her to introduce me. She didn't. She immediately launched into catching up with everyone. One woman, Victoria, finally acknowledged me. Hi, I'm Victoria. You're Sophie's boyfriend, right? Yes, I confirmed. Sophie glanced back as if she'd forgotten my presence. Oh, right. This is Alex. That was all. No mention that we'd been together for 3 years. Just, this is Alex. I reached for the chair beside Sophie. She touched my arm, leaned close, and whispered those words. Just stay quiet around my friends. I froze. What do you mean? She smiled, but her eyes remained cold. Just don't act strange or awkward. They don't really know you yet. Then she moved past the chair I was standing near and settled beside Derek. She gestured toward the far end where a solitary chair sat, isolated by 4 strangers. Alex, you can sit over there. I looked at the chair. I looked at Derek. He wasn't even looking in my direction. He was focused on Sophie, grinning, already deep into some story. I scanned the rest of the table. A few people glanced at me briefly, then looked away. Nobody spoke up. Nobody questioned why I was being exiled. I stood there for perhaps 5 seconds. It felt like an eternity. In my mind, I considered my options. I could sit at that distant chair and pretend everything was fine. I could force a confrontation. I could ask her in front of everyone why she was treating me this way. I did none of those things. I picked up my jacket, turned around, and headed toward the exit. I heard Sophie call my name once. Confusion in her voice. I didn't turn back. I walked out, got in my car, and started driving. I had no destination. I just drove. My hands trembled. My chest felt constricted. I kept replaying that moment. The whisper, the artificial smile, the way she positioned herself beside him and directed me away like some inconvenient stranger. I pulled into a parking lot near my old apartment building and sat in the darkness. I silenced my phone and placed it on the passenger seat. I didn't want to see her name appear. I just needed to sit and breathe. 30 minutes later, I checked my phone. 52 messages. 38 from Sophie, 14 from unknown numbers. The progression was telling. 7:23 p.m. Where did you go? 7:26 p.m. Alex, seriously, where are you? Everyone's asking. This is so embarrassing. 7:35 p.m. I don't understand why you're being like this. It was just a seating arrangement. 7:46 p.m. Please, everyone's staring at me. I didn't mean it like that. Just come back. 8:01 p.m. I know I messed up. Please just come back so we can fix this. 8:08 p.m. I love you. I just wanted tonight to go smoothly. 8:17 p.m. Your car's not here. Where are you? 8:25 p.m. I'm really scared. Please just tell me you're okay. I turned off my phone. I sat in that parking lot until after 9:30, then drove to a hotel near the airport. I checked in, paid cash, messaged my supervisor I'd be working remotely, then powered off my phone. I barely slept. Maybe 3 hours. The rest of the night, I stared at the ceiling, thinking about every moment over the past 18 months where I'd felt invisible. I thought about when she forgot my birthday because she was out with Derek's group. I thought about when she told me not to attend her company party, then posted photos with Derek in the background. When morning came, I knew what I needed to do. I drove back to her apartment at 10. She had a standing Thursday meeting until noon. I parked on the street, used my key one final time, and began packing. My clothing, laptop, books, the espresso machine, the quilt my grandmother made, the framed photo of my childhood dog. 3 trips to my car. By 11:30, I was done. I left my key on the kitchen counter. No note, no explanation. I drove to my friend Marcus's place. He saw the boxes, asked no questions, just helped me unload. That evening, I turned my phone back on. 231 messages. I didn't read them. I blocked Sophie's number, blocked Derek, blocked everyone I didn't recognize. Then I changed my number entirely. Sophie emailed the next day. Subject, please read this. I deleted it without opening. She sent 6 more. I set up a filter to auto-delete anything from her address. Lauren eventually texted from an unblocked number. She said most of their friend group thought Sophie had crossed a serious line. She told me what happened after I left. Sophie tried claiming I wasn't feeling well, but her mood deteriorated as the evening progressed. Derek kept trying to cheer her up, which made everyone uncomfortable. Over the following weeks, I heard fragments. Sophie went to my office. Security turned her away. She called Marcus repeatedly until he blocked her. She messaged my mother. My mom responded, "Alex is fine. Please respect his space." A month later, I ran into Sophie's coworker Emma at a coffee shop. "Sophie's been struggling at work," she said carefully. "She told our manager you abandoned her without explanation." Emma paused. "But Lauren told me what really happened. I don't blame you for leaving." 2 months later, I heard Sophie and Derek tried dating. It lasted 3 weeks before he reconnected with an ex-girlfriend. Sophie deleted all her social media after that. It's been 7 months since I walked out of that restaurant. I'm still staying with Marcus, but I'm apartment hunting now. I received a promotion at work. I started cycling again. I joined a community volleyball league. I've been seeing someone new, a woman named Claire who manages the independent bookstore near my office. She's genuine, and when we're out with her friends, she introduces me proudly, with my full name and a smile that shows she values my presence. I rarely think about Sophie anymore. When I do, I don't remember the good times. I remember that whisper, "Just stay quiet around my friends." I remember the chair at the end of the table. I remember how small she tried to make me, and how much smaller I would have become if I'd stayed. Someone once asked if I regretted not giving her an opportunity to explain. I said no. There was nothing to explain. She showed me precisely who she was. She whispered her priorities directly into my ear, then walked away to sit beside them. I didn't need a conversation. I didn't need closure. I just needed to leave. I heard she reached out to Lauren a few months ago, asking if she'd heard from me. Sophie asked her to relay a message. "Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I understand now." Lauren never passed it along. She knew I didn't need to hear it. I don't hate Sophie. I don't wish anything bad for her. I simply don't think about her at all anymore. That seat at the end of the table, the one she directed me toward, I left it empty. And when I walked out that door, I didn't leave a single piece of myself behind.